One of the final low-altitude night incendiary raids on Japan by the U.S. Army Air Forces occurred on the night of May 25th and 26th, 1945. Leaving from the Mariana Islands and flying 1,500 miles, 464 American B-29s dropped over 3,000 tons of incendiaries on the Yamanote district in the heart of Tokyo. Thousands of people were killed, close to 600,000 people were made homeless, and more than 15 square miles of Tokyo were incinerated. These highly dangerous, low-altitude night firebombings against urban areas were intended to cripple manufacturing, much of which was carried out in small workshops and private homes. This indiscriminate incendiary bombing approach resulted in large-scale urban damage. That night, as the bombing continued, the Tokyo military prison burned, and with it, 62 American airmen POWs who were confined to their cells lost their lives. The few American prisoners who were able to escape the apocalyptic event were killed at the hands of enemy jailers. At war's end, a conspiracy to cover the crimes committed was devised, then revealed at War Crimes Trial Yokohama T-078. The POWs were crowded primarily into 17 cells in the number 4 confinement area. The red circles indicate each bomb that fell, along with the X marks indicating the corpses. The bodies of the American airmen were subsequently dumped into a commingled grave marked by 2 crosses. After the war, the remains located here were collected in mattress covers. In the recovery efforts implemented in 1946 through 1948, the occupying forces provided an exhumation report lacking a thorough investigation of the Tokyo military prison site. Many bone fragments and identifying information were left behind and are believed to be on the site today. Nothing has substantially changed in the past 76 years on this site, and initiating a complete search for DNA material and other remaining assets would be possible, and we believe mandated by the creed, "No man left behind." A list of 65 individual remains was compiled, and X-files were generated for each set of remains. These X-files document the recovered body parts, the X-file number, and additional comments. Interment records show the headstone inscription as well as the X-file number. An additional list identifying each serviceman by name indicates the method of identification used: ID tags, Japanese information, or the office of the Quartermaster General. The skeletal remains in 31 of these X-files were sent to the Manila American Cemetery. The combined weight of these remains is approximately 209 pounds, which indicates that the collection of the prison bodies was done in haste and accounts for only 30% of the full skeletal material. Each of these graves was marked unknown and remains so to this day. Thanks to great courage and sacrifice, the war was concluded, and many of our servicemen returned home. But for the families of these men, there was no joy. Their bodies would remain in a foreign country, undiscovered and/or unidentified. Lives were interrupted, and these families have not been able to bury their dead and to fully mourn their missing husband, father, or son. We must honor our commitment to deal fairly with veterans and their families, something which we have pledged to do for citizens of other countries. The Geneva Convention, in Rule 114, states that parties to the conflict must endeavor to facilitate the return of the remains of the deceased upon the request of the party to which they belong or upon the request of their next of kin. It is time to bring the remains of these men home and give them a grave marked with a name, bringing an end to these families' suffering.
Good afternoon, Martha. You know, it's all part of the fallout from COVID policies that you don't really hear about, but are affecting some of our nation's most special and honored people, our veterans and their families. Tens of thousands of them are waiting in a huge line to receive vital documents from the National Archives for so many things: military identification paperwork, medical benefits, spousal benefits, home loans, even paperwork to identify human remains, and the list goes on. Because of the partial shutdown of the archives and the very limited skeletal staff since March of 2020, there is a huge backlog of, get this, 500,000 requests just sitting there. Michael Crail, the grandson of Sergeant Leonard James McNeil, believed to have been killed during a U.S. bombing campaign over Tokyo during World War II, also waiting for records to help identify his grandfather and 37 other families he's trying to help.
Bring closure to our particular family and these other families. This is 76 years of not knowing.
The National Personnel Records Center in St. Louis, which houses a large amount of records from the archives, acknowledged the debacle, with the director saying this, quote, "We know we are failing, and we know the situation is untenable, and we are eager to fix it."
The DPAA touts the department's willingness and ability to find even one missing POW in a Herculean effort. We are asking here for a much easier and less expensive process. In the face of a worldwide pandemic, when governments shut down, the families of 37 unknown, missing in action POWs have rallied in an effort to provide the necessary DNA family reference samples. These samples are needed to make a positive ID of the remains believed to be from the American airmen killed on May 26, 1945. The families of the American airmen held at Tokyo Military Prison deserve to have these bodies identified and repatriated. We know the locations of the bodies in Manila and in Tokyo. We have the DNA samples. We are asking that these remains be returned to their families so that we can end the 76 years of not knowing.